Dzogchen, the self-perfected state. Chapter 4, the importance of transmission. The Dzogchen teachings are linked to a transmission which resides in the master and which is of fundamental importance for the development of the knowledge and realization of the disciples. In the sutras, it is taught that enlightenment is only possible after many lifetimes dedicated to practice. In the tantras, on the other hand, it is said that one can reach enlightenment in one single lifetime because the methods used are much more effective. In Dzogchen, however, realization is not only considered to be attainable in one lifetime, but the great transference into the body of light is also spoken of. This particular realization, which was actually accomplished by masters such as Padmasambhava and Vimalamitra, and by Tapirits and the Bon tradition, involves the transference or reabsorption without a physical death of the material body into the luminous essence of the elements, in the course of which realization the physical body disappears from the sight of ordinary beings. If one does not succeed in realizing this body of light in one's lifetime, one can realize it after one step, as has happened to many practitioners of Dzogchen in Tibet in recent times. This realization depends not only on the specific methods found in Dzogchen, but also primarily on a function of the transmission from the master. When a Dzogchen master teaches, he or she transmits the state of knowledge through three types of transmission: oral, symbolic, and direct. In Dzogchen, rituals of initiation are not indispensable as they are in Tantrism. The real meaning of initiation is transmission of the state of knowledge, and this can take place through just the giving of a simple explanation. Everything depends on the disciple's capacity to understand. Some masters of the Nyingma tradition have taught that the three transmissions refer to the origins of the Dzogchen teachings. They say that Dzogchen was first transmitted by Samantabhadra, the Dharmakaya, the Vajrasattva, the Sambhogakaya, and that then, from them, it was transmitted to Garabdorja, the Nirmanakaya, by means of symbolic transmission. From Garabdorja, through oral transmission, it was then received by human beings. This explanation makes it seem as if there were three different masters who gave three different kinds of teachings, but in fact, the three transmissions are all inseparable from the master, and they themselves are the path. If direct transmission had come from the Dharmakaya to the Sambhogakaya, it could not be a path, because the Sambhogakaya has no need of a path. The individual is, in fact, made up of body, voice, and mind, all at the same time, and so it is that all three types of transmission are used by the master to communicate the state of knowledge. The oral transmission includes both explanations given by the master to bring the disciple to understand the nature of the primordial state, and methods of practice to enable one to enter into the knowledge of the state. Symbolic transmission takes place both through symbolic objects such as a mirror or a piece of crystal, which are shown to the disciple by the master in order to transmit knowledge of the primordial state, and through stories, parables, and riddles. The direct transmission comes about through the unification of the state of the master with that of the disciple. An example of direct transmission can be found in the story of the awakening of Naropa, the famous Indian Mahasiddha who was a disciple of Tilopa. Naropa was a famous Pandit, a great and learned scholar, and the abbot of Nalanda University, one of the most important centers of Buddhist culture in medieval India. Naropa's knowledge, however, remained at an intellectual doctrinaire level and was not a lived state of knowledge. After several years at Nalanda, following some signs and indications of a visionary nature, he renounced his responsibility as abbot and set off in search of Tilopa, who, according to his visions, would be the master capable of awakening him. After a long and exhausting search, during which he met Tilopa in various guises without recognizing him, Naropa finally bumped into a fisherman who called himself Tilopa. This latter was frying fish in a pan, and with a snap of his fingers was then bringing the fish back to life and throwing them back in the water. Naropa was profoundly disturbed by this meeting, but had faith in his master and followed him for many years, continuously serving him. Throughout this whole time, he received no teachings whatsoever, but Tilopa continually put him to the test of various acts of self-denial. One day, when master and disciple were in a mountain cave, Tilopa asked Naropa to go down into the valley to get him some water to drink. Naropa, despite the sultry heat, after expending a great deal of energy, managed to climb back up with some water. As soon as he saw him, Tilopa took off one sandal and struck Naropa on the forehead with it. Naropa fell down, stunned. When he came to his senses once again, he was greatly changed. Knowledge had been awakened in him. But this was not a miracle carried out by Tilopa. For years and years, Naropa had made a continual self-sacrifice, preparing himself to receive transmission. The value of transmission is not only that of introducing the state of knowledge, but lies also in its function of bringing about the maturing of the transmission, right up until one reaches realization. For this reason, the relationship that links master and disciple is a very close one. The master in Dzogchen is not just like a friend who helps and collaborates with the disciple. Rather, the master is himself or herself the path. This is because the practice of contemplation develops through the unification of the state of the disciple with that of the master. The master is extremely important too at the sutra and the tantra levels of teaching. In the former, because he or she is the holder of Buddha's teachings, and in the latter, because he or she is the source of all the manifestations of transformation. To illustrate this last point, there is a story that tells that when Padmasambhava transmitted the initiation of Vajrakilaya to his Tibetan disciples, he made a mandala of that divinity miraculously appear in front of him, asking them to pay homage. The disciples got up and prostrated in front of the mandala, except for Yesha Chögyal. She alone paid homage to Padmasambhava because she had understood that the master is the root source of manifestations. The master is the gateway to knowledge for the disciple, and his or her transmission is always present in a practitioner's life. One can receive teachings from various masters without any limits, but usually there is one particular master who causes the state of knowledge to arise in a given individual, and this master is known as that individual's root master. I myself, when I was in Tibet, met many masters who gave me teachings and initiations. There was one master in particular, Changchub Dorje, who opened the door to knowledge for me. I remained for several months with this master. During my days there, I had a certain amount of difficulty adjusting to the situation because I was used to important masters who gave teachings and initiations in formal, traditional style. Changchub Dorje, on the other hand, seemed not to be giving me teachings at all, whereas in fact he was actually teaching me to break out of the cage I had constructed for myself. I became aware that even after so many years of study, I had not yet understood the real meaning of the teachings. But I nevertheless did not feel satisfied because this master had not given me any initiations. When I asked Jangchup Dorje to give me an initiation, however, he replied, "You don't need a ritual initiation. You've already received a lot of them from many other masters." But I answered that I wanted to receive one from him, and finally, after considerable insistence on my part, he agreed. He decided to give me the initiation of the 100 peaceful and wrathful divinities, and since he was not an expert in carrying out rituals, he had a disciple who was good at such things help him. That initiation, which usually doesn't take long to give, took him all day to complete. Jangchup Dorje did not know how to carry out the various phases of the ritual, and in fact could not even read fluently. There is a part in such rituals where, to transmit the empowerment through the mantras, the one giving the initiation sounds the bell and Damaru simultaneously. But Jangchup Dorje first sounded the bell and then the Damaru, and then recited the mantra. I was very surprised because I knew very well how the various phases of such ritual initiations should be carried out. That evening, at the end of the initiation, Jangchup Dorje spoke to me and made me understand the real meaning of initiation. At the end of an initiation, masters usually show the disciple the text containing the ritual and describe the lineage of masters who have transmitted it. But Jangchup Dorje didn't show me a book. Rather, for 3 hours without interruption, he spoke to me about the real meaning of the Dzogchen teachings. It seemed almost as if he was reciting a tantra of Dzogchen, so perfect and so profound were the words he spoke. He concluded by saying, "This is the complete transmission of all the 3 series of the Dzogchen teachings, of the series of the nature of the mind, of the series of primordial space, and of the series of secret instructions." The body of light is the supreme realization of Dzogchen. Its function is different from that of the Sambhogakaya manifestation, because a being in a body of light can communicate and actively help other beings. It is as if the physical body, its material substance, having been absorbed into the luminous essence, continues to live as an aggregation of the elements in their subtle aspects. Manifestations of the Sambhogakaya, on the other hand, are passive because they depend on the beings who enjoy the vision of them. Realization is not something one can construct and does not depend on one's actions or effort. Becoming realized basically means just overcoming one's provisional obstacles, and to this end the transmission from one's master is of the greatest help. In Dzogchen, the path to overcoming obstacles can be very rapid, because through the transmission one can easily develop the state of contemplation. From our limited point of view, we can get discouraged thinking that to purify our karma will take many lifetimes. If we could actually materially see our accumulated karma, the good karma might seem like a small rock compared to a huge mountain of negative karma. How long would it take to purify all that? It might seem, perhaps, that even hundreds of purification practices would only diminish the mountain of our negative karma by nothing more than the length of a finger. But karma is not in fact a material accumulation and does not depend on externals. Rather, its power to condition us depends on the obstacles that impede our knowledge. If we compare our karma and the ignorance that creates it to a dark room, knowledge of the primordial state would be like a lamp, which, when lit in the room, at once causes the darkness to disappear, enlightening everything. In the same way, if one has the presence of the primordial state, one can overcome all hindrances in an instant. A practitioner who is just beginning to try to find a state of presence among the confusion of all of his or her thoughts is like a blind person trying to push a thread through the eye of a needle. The master is like someone who sees and helps that person to get his or her hands closer to where they have to be. When the blind person succeeds in threading the needle, it is as if their sight had returned to them. This is how it is the moment one recognizes and enters into the primordial state by means of the transmission. The example of the sky, the sun, and the clouds is given to explain the condition of the individual. The sky is not a definable place. It has no shape or color, and no one can say where it starts or finishes. It is something universal, as is the primordial state of the individual, the void. The base at the level of the individual is like the space inside a clay vase, which, even though it is temporarily limited by the shape of the vase, is not different from the space outside, surrounding the vase. This void condition, which is like empty space, is called the essence, and it is beyond all concepts. But in it there is a continuous clarity that manifests in the individual's thoughts and the various aspects of energy. The clarity is the state of presence, which is like a sun arising in the sky. The light of the sun is the manifestation of the clarity of the sky, and the sky is the basic condition necessary for the manifestation of the sun's light. So too, in the sky, 2, 3, 4, or any number of suns could arise, but the sky always remains indivisibly one sky. Similarly, every individual's state of presence is unique and distinct, but the void nature of the individual is universal and common to all beings. Lastly, we have the example of clouds, which represent the provisional hindrances that impede the manifestation of our primordial state. When clouds grow dense, it is as if the sun didn't exist, but the fact is that the sun has not changed its position at all. Both day and night, the sun is always there, but its rays don't always light up the earth. In the same way, the primordial state of knowledge is always there in the individual right from the beginning, whether one transmigrates or is enlightened. But if it does not manifest, it is because of our ignorance. Enlightenment, or nirvana, is nothing other than the state beyond all obstacles, in the same way that from the peak of a very high mountain, one always sees the sun. Nirvana is not a paradise or some special place of happiness, but is in fact the condition beyond all dualistic concepts, including those of happiness and suffering. When all our obstacles have been overcome, and we find ourselves in a state of total presence, the wisdom of enlightenment manifests spontaneously without limits, just like the infinite rays of the sun. The clouds have dissolved, and the sun is finally free to shine once again.